Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of Bets and Banter, and today on the show, we're going over UFC 313, and it is going down live with our boy, our friend of the show, a returning guest, somebody that has been much requested. WizzMMA back in the building. My brother, how you feeling? We got a pay-per-view fight week this week.
First and foremost, before I even say anything, thanks for having me on again. I mean, I think I started this whole Twitter journey with you side by side, and we used to do shows on a weekly basis, and then we had Lou and Gordo. That was fun, and just coming full circle and doing this again. I haven't done content in quite some time. Just posting on Twitter, on Instagram, posting like training videos and whatnot. I wouldn't come back and do it with anyone else, to be honest with you. Content has been, I wouldn't say a struggle for me, but maybe just not high on my priority list. But I'm very happy to be here, and I'm excited to break this card down with you.
Hell yeah, my man. If there was ever a time to do it, why not for a pay-per-view event? We're glad to have you back. The content space can always use more from my brother Wiz, and I'm always excited to hear what you have to say. We've had some of your prescient analysis on the show before. I remember you were talking about our guy Carlos Prates when he was on the rise, and a few other times that you've had some, pretty memorable shouts on the show. So I'm sure the people remember as well. Want to shout out to our guy Dixon here, always first in the chat. Dixon, God bless you for it. Says, Liam, we're going to need you to start tweeting out the free NBA plays pregame. My man, I did not sweep the board, but I will say I have been on an absolute heater in the NBA. So I might have to start letting people know just out of love and respect. But without further ado, guys, if you're new to the show, we always start the same way. We start with the first fight of the night. We work our way on up to the top. That's what we're going to do once again. And we talk about our thoughts on the fight. If we have a strong lean one way or the other, we're going to let you know that. But otherwise, we're just going to talk through it. We're going to talk through the betting dynamics, and we're going to see if we can find some interesting angles. Peace, love, and chicken grease to each and every one of you guys. We're going to start with the first fight of the night here. And this is a weird one for me. You've got Chris Gutierrez and John Castaneda. This is a fight that was announced during fight week. And, you got both guys kind of on short notice here. Obviously, Castaneda was supposed to have a fight, right? And then things didn't work out with his opponent. So now they're just reshuffling him. I believe they're moving this up to 145 pounds. It lists 135 on Tapology. I'd be a little bit surprised if he's cutting back down, 2 weeks in a row, but we'll have to see what happens there. As far as this fight's concerned, though, I think Castaneda has some interesting skills. He can compete in all phases, but the thing that worries me is, he's pretty vulnerable, I think, to getting low kicked. And Gutierrez is, a one-note fighter. But I always say if you're going to be a one-trick pony, it's got to be a good trick, right? And in wrestling, I think that's something that you take away. There's guys that just have one move, but they perfect it. They hit it all the time, and they can go out there and hit it even on good guys. And I think that Chris Gutierrez, people know what to expect. A lot of times they still can't stop it, right? He just goes out there, he spams it early, and we know that you can have a great skill set, right? Imagine I'm a great wrestler, but now I can't step onto my lead leg. My wrestling's not very good now if I can't drive, right? If I don't have any power, any force behind it, if I can't run through my shots, my takedowns, that's going to be a problem for me. So I do think leg kicking is a great way to solve, a wrestling problem, right? To try and take somebody's legs out of the equation, take some of that drive away. Do I think it could be a problem for Gutierrez if Castaneda gets on top? Yes, we have seen him get 10-8'd before by a flyweight and Cody Durden. When he gets taken to the ground, sometimes guys can put him through that spin cycle. I think he's made some improvements there, but we've also seen fights where he gets held down, dominated from the top position. So I think ultimately this is not a fight I really feel like investing hard-earned coins in. I feel like there's a lot of inherent variance in a fight like this, but I'm curious to hear what you think about this one, Wiz.
Yeah, it's an interesting matchup. Came together just last minute, really. You look at a guy in John Castaneda who should have fought last weekend, didn't fall through. I've confirmed that they're no longer fighting at 135. This is going to be a 145 catch weight. So, I mean, obviously Castaneda does not walk around at 145, so he's still going to have to cut some weight. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic. Also, Chris Gutierrez wasn't really getting ready to fight anybody, so you can say he's coming off the couch. I have not done any like Instagram deep dives with him to see if he's been in the room or at all over the past like month or so. But we know what these guys bring. Chris Gutierrez is for a lack of better words, just a one-dimensional fighter. You know what he brings to the table. He's going to go after those legs. And if he can't do that successfully, he tends to just be there. And he's almost like a punching bag. I hate to say it. But on the other hand, John Castaneda, he's a guy that I would like to say is somewhat well-rounded. But he has his flaws too. He can be kind of low volume at points. And last time out against Daniel Marcos, he was just getting outstruck and outpointed. So Daniel Marcos is no shame in that loss at all. He's a top tier striker in the division, and Castaneda is just not up to the challenge. And then Chris Gutierrez, this is a interesting tidbit here. Quang Lee, teammate of John Castaneda, just fought Chris Gutierrez on short notice, I believe it was, and huge underdog, took a round off of Chris Gutierrez with what specifically? It was the wrestling. And I think Castaneda can go to the well here with the wrestling. If he finds some success, I think this is going to be his fight to lose. If he's able to take Chris Gutierrez down repetitively throughout this fight, I could make a case for a John Castaneda 30-27. Am I confident in that, though? That's a different story. I don't think so. This is a very close fight to call, and too much variance to even think about betting on. When you have too many factors, short notice, one guy cutting weight for the second time, sure, albeit 10 pounds heavier, he is the smaller guy here. So that extra weight's not gonna look as good as it's gonna look on Chris Gutierrez, if that makes sense. There's a 3-inch height advantage for Gutierrez, but surprisingly, there's a 4-inch reach advantage for Castaneda. So it's going to be interesting to see how these striking exchanges go and who's able to get their game off first. And I think that's just going to be what decides this fight. Whoever is able to get their game down first, whether it's Chris Gutierrez with the leg kicks or if it's Castaneda with his wrestling. I ultimately am going to predict Castaneda to win on very slim margins. Could be a split decision here. So, yeah, call me up for a Castaneda split.
Hell yeah, my man. I like where your head's at. I wanted to add some context for the viewer. I went back and Instagram stalked Chris Gutierrez, and I saw some training footage of him that said like getting ready for UFC 313 from 7 weeks ago. And it's because he was preparing to fight John Matsumoto. And if you remember, John Matsumoto gets pulled up to fight Rob Font, and then he becomes a favorite against Rob Font. I cashed on Rob Font as an underdog in that one. That was one that I was very happy about. However, now you look at Chris Gutierrez, he was kind of left hanging out in the ether. Then they say, okay, now we've got this guy Castaneda who just got weight last week, still looking for a fight, right? Still in Vegas, ready to go. So I think that's the kind of thing where they just found some opportunity there. Hey, let's get Chris back on the card. He was already training. He was already in shape. So did Chris stop training and get out of shape? I don't know. Maybe they told him, hey, stay ready. We'll look for an opponent for you on short notice. And in any case, he does appear to have some, cardiovascular base heading into this one. I think that's important for him. And, to just, close out thoughts on this fight, we look back at this matchup. We've got two 33-year-olds, right? The bigger fighter in terms of height is Gutierrez. The bigger fighter in terms of reach is Castaneda. It's like 6 of one, half dozen of another with these two guys, and the line is pick 'em. It just feels right to me, pretty appropriate. I think if it's a purely striking fight, I like Gutierrez with the low kicks, to your point. And if it's not, if Castaneda is able to make it dirty, get the wrestling going, make it a dog fight, maybe grit out those first 2 rounds, I think he can win this fight. So that's the way I see it going down. It's going to be a close one, probably going to go to decision more often than not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, none of these guys are the most prolific finishers ever. So, yeah, I would expect the same.
Absolutely. And the last thing I'll note here as well, I went back to betmma.tips and I bet John Castaneda as a dog against Miles Johns plus 195, but that's the only time I've ever bet on him in the UFC. I feel like he's the kind of guy you want to bet on as a dog. You go out there and fight hard for your money. But when you're laying chalk with a guy that has some vulnerabilities, that's 33 years old, that hasn't proven to be like a lights out fighter in the UFC, it's a little bit tough for me. I think this fight is very competitive. Next up, my man, we got Ozzy Diaz taking on Desjordins Santos. And not to toot my own horn, my man, I did call Desjordins Santos as an underdog on the Contender Series. I was like, why is Will Curry a minus 400 when his cardio is not good? And I felt like the Jordan Santos, even though he didn't look that explosive, that dynamic, he just had shown that he could go out there and fight an ugly 15 minutes if he needed to. And I felt like that was going to be enough. And now he looks to be getting in good shape. So I'm kind of curious. Wiz, we'll have you lead us off here. What do you think about this matchup? Jordan Santos, he's back in the saddle. Ozzy Diaz kind of needs one here, dropping down to 185, looking for one at this point. What do you think?
Yeah, I was about to say Ozzy Diaz hasn't fought at 185 in quite some time. He started off his career there, and then it just looks like he didn't want to cut the extra weight, so he moved up to light heavyweight. So that's an interesting dynamic. Ozzy Diaz is going to have some measurables to his advantage here. 4 inches of height, and then it's 3.5 inches of reach. Ozzy Diaz, for what it's worth, in the first round, he goes out there, he gives it his all, and is a tough guy. But the issue, at least at light heavyweight, was he got one round and that's it. After the first round, it's kind of downhill from there in terms of cardio. And on the other hand, you look at the Jordan Santos, and you can't really find tape on this guy anywhere. You can maybe find a fight aside from the Will Curry fight. So there's a lot of unknowns on that side. But the one issue I have with Ozzy Diaz is he's been finished in all of his losses. So 3 knockout losses, going up against someone who predominantly goes out there and fights tooth and nail with most people on the Brazilian regional scene. Has a couple of knockouts to his record as well, and proved against Will Curry that he can go the 3 rounds at that heavy pace. And you know what? Will Curry is not someone that I'm high on, but I would say Will Curry against anyone that's on Ozzy Diaz's record, I would consider it a Will Curry win. So for me, I think the Jordan Santos kind of has his fight here to lose. Uh, it's a little bit puzzling to me why they've made this matchup. 2 fairly unknown guys, one guy moving down a weight class. I don't have the best read on it, to be honest with you, Liam, but I think the Jordan Santos is going to be able to outstrike Ozzy Diaz here. And if Ozzy Diaz death gasses like Will Curry did, we all know what's going to happen there. So I think the Jordan Santos wins here. I think he finishes Ozzy Diaz in the second round. Let's say the second half of the second round.
Yeah, I'm not an Ozzy Diaz guy,
Yeah.
I just think, number one, when you look at him at light heavyweight, the body composition, he didn't look like a serious athlete. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. That's just my read on it. And looking at the Ming Yang Zhang fight, I thought he was going to get lit up in that fight. I didn't think he had much of a chance there. He goes out and throws. Ming Yang Zhang could just take a better shot. He could give a better shot. It's a disaster of a fight for Ozzy Diaz, and he basically needed to grapple, I felt like, to have any chance at all in that fight. I thought it was an inevitability. He would get smoked on the feet. But Von Lewis, just not it anymore. No disrespect. The guy used to have it. He doesn't really have it anymore. He's also fighting up at a suboptimal weight class. Chuck Campbell, don't know how to rate that win. Bruno Assis, not a win that I rate. Losing to Joe Pyfer is fair enough. You give him that, but overall, I just look at Ozzy Diaz as a guy who's 34 years of age. He's not very physically talented. And I think that the Jordan Santos has a little bit more upside to his career. Just in terms of how it'll play out. He's 27 years of age. He's a guy that's clearly getting in much better shape physically, fight over fight, and, probably getting more professional resources, probably devoting more of his time and his life to training that he wasn't able to in the past. And when you're in the prime of your life and your athletic career at 27, you could probably still make that happen and make those big skill improvements, those leaps fight over fight. I think that he's the more proven guy in longer fights. So do I think that you should go lay minus 200 with the Jordan Santos? No, I think he's the kind of guy like John Castaneda at a big plus money number. Yeah, you get behind this guy. He'll go out there, fight, make it dirty. Do you want to go lay minus 200 with him? I don't know about that, but do I think he is the deserved favorite here? Yeah, I just think he checks a couple more of the intangible boxes. If you wanted to point to what is Ozzy Diaz's upside here, he's the bigger fighter. He's got a little bit more experience. He's been in some of these upper echelon promotions. To your point, Wiz, maybe a little bit more tape on the Ozzy Diaz side, a decorated amateur career where he fought a guy like Dominic Reyes as well. So I think that there are some things about Ozzy Diaz that you could make a case. But I just don't think it's enough plus money for me. I think he's a little too slow. I don't think he's very durable. So all those things I think point towards Desjardins Santos being the rightful favorite here. Anything to add, Wiz?
Nothing at all. I think this fight's just a big question mark. I see Kate in the chat asking or mentioning that anytime I hear a capper break this fight down, it's only just bringing up that one Contender Series fight for Desjardins. The reason for that is you just can't find tape on this guy besides like that one Contender Series fight, and I believe there's one more. I didn't even bother to go tape that second fight because I remember it from when I taped it in the Contender Series. But if you go and try to find any of his other fights, there's nowhere to be found on any platform. So if anyone does find them, please send them my way.
All right. I had to go through the archives because I am a man of real study. Fight by fight preview from Will Curry and Desjardins Santos. Will Curry opened. I said, I believe the correct fighter is favored, but the odds are off. Curry is a physical force for about 7.5 minutes, but he's a known gasser. Santos is less physical, but he has fought 5 hard fives and won the bout. Curry loses top position, gets reversed, plays too much guard, etc. So at the end of the day, what was the analysis there? Yeah, maybe Will Curry, because he's an athletic freak and he's a little bit more of a talented guy physically, should be favored against a guy like Desjardins Santos. But Desjardins Santos can make you pay if you leave him out there for 7.5 minutes. And now we kick it to this fight. And could Ozzy Diaz clip him on the chin? I mean, I guess. But is Ozzy Diaz the scariest guy? Am I like super worried about Ozzy? Not particularly. So I think Desjardins Santos could probably make him work, make it a dogfight, make it gritty, use his youthful vigor and go out there and get the win. So that's ultimately the way I see this one. But I don't think he's a great click at a favorite price tag. But I did do the analysis when he fought on Contender Series. That's why I'm deferring back to it. There's not a lot of tape, but he had fought 5 hard fives. He went out there and beat Will Curry, who in my opinion is like a similar tier fighter to this. And the other thing about Will Curry is he's in his athletic prime. And I don't think we're saying the same thing about Ozzy Diaz personally. So
Liam, if you were to line Will Curry versus Ozzy Diaz, what would you line it?
Will Curry minus 150.
Okay.
Because I think Will Curry is the kind of guy that you cannot make a big favorite against most people. Unless he's a complete, like, they have no chance, they have nothing to offer him athletically. Like, I think that he's the kind of guy that could just banana peel you.
Yeah. 7.5 minutes. I mean, both guys have 7.5 minutes of cardio. What happens after the 7.5 minute mark? It's a slop fest.
I do think Will Curry, though, just more athletic composition. I think Ozzy Diaz has more heart than him, though. Maybe Ozzy Diaz would be a good live click against Will Curry, but I just think there's a decent chance Will Curry could come out, take him down in the first round, and kind of smash him on the ground,
Yeah, I could see that.
All right, we can move along to the next one here, where we've got Myron Santos taking on Francis Marshall, and I'll lead us off here. I will risk looking like a fool and say that I think that this line is a little bit wide on Francis Marshall. Now, am I being biased towards our Northeast guys? I really don't think so. If you look back, I've been pretty fair about my Francis Marshall analysis, I think, in the past. I think I predicted Dennis Bazooka by split decision. It went to Marshall by split decision. It was a close fight. If you look back, I predicted Isaac Dolgarian via KO in the first round. He absolutely destroyed him, right? And it was no fault of Francis Marshall. I think that's the most dangerous guy at 145 pounds for like 4 minutes. If you just take Isaac out there, let him out of a cage, 4 minutes of just hellacious top pressure, you don't want to be under there, nobody. So, that's kind of the way I feel about Isaac. He's a dominant first-round fighter, and Francis Marshall was a young kid getting thrown to an absolute physical alpha wolf who just took him to the woodshed, right? Now I look at this fight, and could I see it playing out the same way? Yeah. We've got a less experienced guy in Marshall, right? Less pro experience than Myron Santos, similar age, right? Both guys right around that 25 physical development, right? But I think Francis Marshall he's on the other side of 25, almost 26 years of age. You basically expect like he's a finished product physically. He's going to keep getting better, adding skills, developing a little bit. Maybe his athletic prime will be when those skills meet up with the physicality. But ultimately, I feel like he's probably in the body he's going to be in for the rest of his professional career right now. And when you look at where he's training now, he's training with guys at American Top Team, with Grant Dawson and a lot of other top lightweights, Mateus Gamrot. He's getting probably the injections that everybody else at American Top Team is getting, no disrespect. And you're looking at those kind of things for Francis, where he maybe wasn't getting that in the past, going to Kurt Pellegrino MMA, being a good fighter there, but still having a lot to learn. And he's a black belt under Kurt Pellegrino. He's training an American Top Team. And you look at Dan Argueta take Myron Santos to the absolute woodshed a few years back, and you say to yourself, is that not possible to happen again? Because the one thing I will note is Francis Marshall also had a tough, unfortunate run out against William Gomis. You look back at that fight, close split decision. That's the William Gomis special, right? He goes out there, takes a close split decision against guys. And I predicted Hyder Amil via split decision against William Gomis. I thought he would do more and have better optics. Ultimately, he got it done. But Francis Marshall, y'all must have forgot that he was on top of this dude in round 3, beating him up, looking for chokes at the end of the fight, and ultimately just couldn't get the job done. He ran out of time there. But William Gomis was looking like he was ready to go home and in all sorts of trouble. So I think that Francis Marshall could go out there and implement a grappling heavy game plan and have success. If you look at Con Offley, his biggest problem against Myron Santos was a lack of physicality, a lack of determination with the wrestling to chain attempts together, and frankly, an inability to compete at all on the feet. And I do think Francis Marshall will get knocked the fuck out. If he stays on the feet and just tries to trade blows with this guy, he's going to get hurt really badly. Myron Santos is faster. He makes better reads on the feet. Francis Marshall is less accurate. That's one thing that really stands out as a negative from his UFC stats, right? He just has not been connecting with the target as frequently as you'd like, but he does have some power in his hands. He does have some commitment with his strikes. He's willing to move forward. He's not afraid to fight. And he is a guy that probably has the takedown upside, the grappling upside, I would argue, in this matchup between the two guys. So ultimately, I think that when you have a fight between two guys that are both roughly the same in terms of age, when I'm seeing a guy in Myron Santos who multiple times on The Ultimate Fighter was in very close nip-tuck decisions where he's getting out-wrestled for large portions of the contest, I just have to think Francis Marshall is probably going to compete a little bit closer than the number if he doesn't get knocked out in the first round. So ultimately, that's my take on this fight, is that Francis Marshall is a live underdog. What do you think about this one, Wiz?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I do think Francis Marshall has the capability of making this fight close. Do I think it's going to happen? Absolutely not. My one issue with Francis Marshall is sometimes he's just not urgent with the takedowns, and he likes to stand on the feet. And as you mentioned, if he stays on the feet for too long, he's going to get knocked the fuck out. And I agree. Myron Santos is levels above him in terms of the striking, with all due respect. Much faster, chains combinations to the body, to the head, goes through all levels. Whereas Francis Marshall, I mean, I'm not going to say he's one-dimensional with the wrestling. He has serviceable striking, but it's just the defense that we see is a struggle. He gets hit a lot. And if we're talking about Francis Marshall's game plan here or path to victory would be to pressure and wrestle, a guy like William Gomis is someone that I consider to be more willing to accept pressure than most, and he wasn't able to do it successfully against William Gomis. Sure, William Gomis had the measurables in terms of advantages against him, but Gomis is someone that you can pressure against the cage, you can take him down, you can exhaust him, similar to how Hyder did, but Hyder is just a freak athlete with his cardio. I don't think Francis is going to be able to do that, and I think, unfortunately, that's the only way he's going to win this fight. For me, I think the favorite price is warranted on Myron Santos. Maybe not this wide of a favorite, given that it's his second, or I want to say his debut in the UFC after the Ultimate Fighter finale against Offley. So I think this is Myron Santos' fight to lose, quite frankly. So I think Myron Santos via round 1 knockout is the most likely outcome, in my opinion. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if Francis Marshall grits it out into like the second or third, keeps things interesting.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. I think that this is going to be a competitive fight. I have to admit, I got half sidetracked for a second. I just made my NBA heater right now is so inexplicable that I have to just share. I had like I basically said on Patreon, I was like, I can't not share because I've been on such a heater. And then I went and took LeBron 4+ 3-pointers plus 235, 5+ 3-pointers plus 550. Oh my God. Oh my God.
I have the game on
LeBron
right
is
here in the background
disgusting.
too.
Oh, thank you, Lord. Thank you. I literally need to like I gotta go to church 100% this week. What a week. All right. We are right back to the fighting action. Great stuff from my guy Wiz. I think it should be a fun and an interesting fight between two young guys. They both got a great opportunity on a pay-per-view card. Let's find out. Good stuff. Next up.
Here we go.
Oh, we've got
People's main event.
what the odds makers are describing as a lamb to slaughter. We have Alex Morono, the UFC veteran, a battle-tested individual who does appear to be rounding out of form into a 34-year-old who's been on the wrong end of some brutal knockouts, who's been hurt a lot of times. It's cost him some important fights in his career, even when he was a younger man, a more durable man. And now he's more of a coach than he is an athlete in many ways. But Alex Morono is a battle-tested guy. On the other side, Carlos Leal, I'm going to just say, in my opinion, it's one of the worst robberies I've ever been on the other side of. I've had a bunch that have hurt me. I did have Carlos Leal at a big plus money number there. I did want to puke in my hands. I did think about going and becoming Liam Picks Hoops and fucking doing something else with my life because this sport can be so grating sometimes, guys, when the judges just rob you or the referee robs you, or all matter of different things that can happen in a mixed martial arts contest that can drive you crazy. Your guy forgets how to shoot takedowns for the first time in his career, all these things that we know and love about capping the sport. But ultimately, I thought Carlos Leal beat Renat Fakhretdinov, and I thought that, it was an unfortunate hose job because of the location, and life goes on. I think that they are now giving him this fight because of that. Does he go out there and deliver? I don't know. I think that he's a big juiced up guy that hits very hard and could definitely kill Alex Morono. But again, Carlos Leal is the kind of guy I want to bet on at a big plus money number. Like, do I think he has a better future in the UFC than Alex Morono right now? Yeah, I do. But do I think that he's invincible, impervious to making mistakes? No. And we even saw him get hurt against Renat. That was what cost him. Like, he hurt Renat more. He did more damage. He beat the shit out of him, but he was just there to be hit on the return a few times, too many. And it cost him in the eyes of the judges. It was just close enough that they were able to rob him. But ultimately, I thought he clearly won the fight, and I think that he's going to win this fight as well, but it's priced prohibitively, and I just don't feel that I need to go lay a minus 600 price on a guy that was going out there and having very competitive striking exchanges with Renat.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell a little story about Carlos Leal because for those who don't know, I cover the PFL in depth when it comes to media, and I have a relationship with Carlos Leal. There is a language barrier there, but whenever there's translators, you can get your questions off. And I've been covering Leal since the David Zawada fight. This was, 2023 in April. And I remember after that win, nobody in the media room really even wanted to interview this guy because nobody thought much of him. And I was just there analyzing. It was mainly just the Brazilian and Portuguese coverage that was asking the questions. And he keeps racking up some wins. And then he goes to a very close split decision against a very good striker in Sada Boussi, who I respect. Multiple time PFL world champion, $1 million winner twice. Sada Boussi is legit, and going to split with him on the feet, showing the dog that he did is just very impressive. So props to Carlos Leal for really following through with his career and making it to this level. And in my opinion, and yours as well, and I want to say most people, he won that Renat Fakhretdinov fight. I was very surprised to hear the decision, and I remember it was like 7 or 8 in the morning. No, it was 7 in the morning, first fight. Like, how the hell did the judges get the first one wrong? And from there, it was downhill. I think there was a couple of other bad decisions that card too. But nonetheless, in this fight, we have someone who is on the come up, and Carlos Leal still has his power. Might not have the same vitamins that he was taking with the PFL, but we have another guy in Alex Morono who's starting to, physically decline. And the growing trend right now on Twitter is he gonna get milked? That's what the popular kids are saying. Is Carlos Leal gonna milk Morono? I think he will. I think he's gonna knock this guy out in the first round. With all due respect, Morono's chin has grown to be more and more fragile, and then I just don't think he has the striking defense to really extend this fight into the second or third round where Carlos Leal is going to slow down, and maybe Morono's technical boxing will outshine the big power from the other side. I think this is just going to be one-way traffic in the first round, and if Leal can't get him out, we may have an interesting fight on our hands, but I just don't see that happening. I see Leal finishing Morono in the first round here. Yeah, that's as simple as that. I tried to really break this fight down in a sense to give Morono some sort of equity in a decision. I just don't really see how this fight even makes it there. So for all those reasons, I think it's Carlos Leal by knockout whenever he wants.
Yeah, I'm just gonna tend to agree with you, my man. We see this one the same way. I think Leal's gonna knock him out. I think it's priced prohibitively, but I'd probably rather be on an under or something like that that just leans into the violence, because if he doesn't finish it inside the distance, to your point, that means something probably went wrong along the way. Because I just think he's too fast, too powerful, too aggressive, too violent. And we've seen Morono go out there, throw a naked leg kick, and get put in the box instantly by Chaos before. So I think the same thing's probably live to happen here.
Mhm.
All right, my man. Let's move to the next fight where we've got Bruno Ferreira taking on Armen Petrosian. And I'll lead us off on this one. I think Bruno Ferreira is a live underdog in this spot, right? We've got the younger fighter on the one side. He is the smaller fighter here, but his reach, 72 inches, right? So he kind of bats above his height in terms of his reach, which is good. Then you look at a guy like Armen Petrosian on the other side, just 8-4 as a professional. So he is the guy who is older, right? He has less professional experience than Bruno Ferreira, and he doesn't have grappling upside, right? If you look at Bruno Ferreira, he's difficult to outgrapple, right? We saw Abus Magomedov, who is absolutely huge and does know how to wrestle and grapple, get on top of him, and he needed multiple takedowns, because every time this guy would grab a hold of a baseball bat grip with two hands on one and then pull it over the top and get back out. And he would get his back taken and turn back in and get on top. And then he would defend a shot, put him in a front headlock, bring it back up to the feet. He hurt Abus Magomedov so badly in the second round of that fight and was unable to finish it because he got taken down by surprise. And once Abus realized I could take this guy down, he went back to it all night because he needed to. He was getting hurt badly on the feet. He didn't want to be there no more. And I think that when you look at Bruno Ferreira, he can crack you on the feet. I think he is an underrated striker in terms of the fact that he can go out there and hit people hard. But he's not just close eyes, swing bungalows, and people pretend that he's that. You watch his fights, he makes reads, he steps through into different positions, and then he throws combinations. So am I saying he's the world's most sophisticated striker? No, but he does make adjustments over time. Watch him pull RoboCop out of his stance, then kill him. What, like he doesn't just go out there and throw like swinging Francis Ngannou bombs, right? He actually pulls the guy, throws in combination, gets him out of position, then kills him. And by the way, against Phil Hawes, look at how aggressive he is with the follow-ups. This guy's playing for keeps, baby. He's not out there to do a Jalen Turner, hit you one time hard and walk off. He is going to make sure he dead. So when you look at a guy like Bruno Ferreira, he's the more violent guy, in my view. He's the more assertive, aggressive fighter. He's got the grappling upside. He's the younger guy with more pro experience. Plus 130. That's the side for me. I'll kick it over to you, Wiz. What do you think?
Yeah, so let's look through the past two fights for each of these guys. So against the Boost, you already broke that down, so I'm not even gonna get close to that. Once he found the takedowns, that's kind of where the fight went downhill for Bruno. And then against Dustin Stoltzfus, let's revisit that fight. Dustin Stoltzfus hurt Bruno Ferreira in that first round. Dustin Stoltzfus took Bruno down in that first round. I don't know how he wasn't able to finish Bruno on the mat. It was very close to being stopped. Bruno found his way up. and just he chucked that elbow like it was crazy. That spinning elbow was arguably knockout of the year, for me at least. And then you look at Arman, last two fights, both losses. Obviously, the Shara Bullet loss with the double spinning back fist. Like, who would have even expected that out of nowhere? Uh, Predominantly a stand-up fight, and then, or for the most part, a stand-up fight. And then against Rodolfo Vieira, you have a guy in Rodolfo Vieira that is multi-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion on your back. You're gonna get choked out. So, where's the disconnect in this fight? Arman Petrosyan is not the guy that's going to be wrestling here. He's not going to try and shoot any takedowns. He's more known for his kickboxing. And that just plays right into Bruno Ferreira's game plan here. The longer this fight stays on the feet, the more opportunities you're going to give Bruno Ferreira to find that button. And I think he's going to be able to do it. Especially with the old glove being brought back, we've seen the amount of finishes skyrocket over the past week. I think this fight's going to be competitive until Bruno finds the kill shot, because Arman, skill for skill, is the better fighter. Is the more technical kickboxer. He's going to be the larger fighter in there, as a 4-inch height advantage, and then he's at a 1-inch reach disadvantage, which is not going to really matter too much. I just can't help but think Bruno's going to land something that changes the trajectory of this fight, no matter if Arman is winning from pillar to post, and then Arman is just going to get finished. I don't see any other way. Arman could win a low volume kickboxing decision. So I'm kind of interested to see where that line is at, because that's where I put most of his win equity. I don't think he's going to knock Bruno Ferreira out. Arman's not really known for having that kind of power, really. Let's see if I can pull this up really quickly. What Arman Petrosyan by decision would be. Here it is. Arman Petrosyan
plus 210 is what I'm seeing.
That's not enough. Quite frankly, that is not enough. I would rather play the Bruno Ferreira by KO TKO at plus 225. That's where all my attention is going. So I think Bruno Ferreira is going to find the kill shot here and knock Arman out at some point in the first or second round. If it makes it to the third, something's wrong.
You know what I find fascinating? I'm seeing that the money line on Bruno Ferreira is plus 130, and Bruno Ferreira inside the distance is plus 135. So Bet Online is basically saying that all of his win equity is inside the distance, which I don't think is true, first and foremost. But the other thing I want to say is, if you guys know wrestling, go back and watch the Bruno Ferreira Phil Hawes fight. This guy is not just a grappler, he is a wrestler as well. He threw Phil Hawes with a hip toss. His judo is excellent. And when you look back, he did it once offensively. So he gets in the clinch offensively and grabs a hold of him basically in like an arm throw, digs through, hits it, gets on top into side control. Phil Hawes does a great job scrambling back up while he's landing ground and pound. Okay, fair enough. So what happens? They get back into the clinch. He lands a bunch of huge strikes. And then when Phil Hawes tries to level change and go takedown, he says, hold this lat drop, and then throws him right back to his back again. So you see that Bruno Ferreira, he's got offensive wrestling. He's got defensive wrestling. He's got judo. He's got an ability to mix in some submission attempts, which we've seen on the regionals before. So for me, the guy is like extremely dangerous in all positions, and I think he could also win if the fight goes 15. We saw basically a very competitive fight that was 1 round apiece with Abus Magomedov until Abus landed on top for the 3rd time in the full mount, and he was like, all right, I can't get up this time. He basically fought like an absolute dog until the bitter end there. So as far as I'm concerned, Bruno Ferreira, still a very competitive young guy, and I think he's dangerous off the trot. So give me Bruno Ferreira as the outright pick for me. Not just like I think he's a live underdog. I think he's going to win the fight, period. So,
Let's go.
All right, man. Next up, we've got Ray Saruya taking on Joshua Van. Why don't you have us lead off on this one, Wiz? What do you think, my brother?
Here we go. So I've talked to a couple of people in the community about this fight. And a lot of people see this fight going very similar to the Charles Johnson fight against Joshua Van. There's one big difference between Charles Johnson and Ray Saruya, is that Charles Johnson actually can strike. Charles Johnson can mix up the levels with the striking, and sure, he may not have the most power, but he puts out volume. The one thing we've seen Ray Soria struggle with is the striking. If he can't get his hand, his grappling going, he doesn't really have much of a stand-up game. Against Carlos Hernandez, seemed to struggle at points on the feet, but was able to land the takedowns and control, even though Hernandez kept getting up. I just think this is Joshua Van and Joshua Van all day, because we've seen Joshua Van stuff takedowns against Charles Johnson nonstop. Sure, he got knocked out in the third, but he was giving Charles Johnson hell all fight on the feet. And this guy, Joshua Van, when he's able to stop takedowns, he's going to dig to the body. And that's the one thing where I think Soria is going to struggle with, that body work. It's going to slow Soria down. And as someone who would predominantly wrestle and grapple in fights, when you start to stay in the striking realm where you're uncomfortable and you're getting tagged to all levels, it's just going to slow you down that much more. It's going to make you a little bit more hesitant to shoot in, because every time you're shooting in, you're getting punished. And we all know Joshua Van has cardio for days. Sure, the line is a little inflated here. I do think Ray Soria could find some success with the wrestling and the grappling in the first round. But if he's not able to get a submission while they're dry, I think it's just a great Joshua Van live spot after round one. So that's the way I'm targeting this fight. I think Joshua Van's going to put a beating on Ray Soria and potentially finish him in the third round. So I've already played the Joshua Van third round. Let me see what odds I got here. Unfortunately, I'm in a state where I do not have access to lines like DraftKings and the FanDuel lines. I got Joshua Van round 3 at plus 950. So I think Joshua Van could either finish him late here or win a decision decisively. But the majority of the way that I want to have equity in this fight is going to be live after round 1, if it makes it there. I think it's Josh Van and Josh Van all the way. As long as he's able to stuff the first takedown or two, I think he cruises here. But Liam, I'm actually interested in hearing what you have to say here, because my man, you're the wrestling coach here, and you know more than I do when it comes to the grappling. So very interested to hear your take.
You know, I don't think this is an easy fight to call. And one guy I've kind of struggled to pick some of his fights is Joshua Van. You know, I actually picked him in his first UFC fight. He was a plus 175 underdog against August Umagulov. I picked him by knockout in the first round. Ended up being a close split decision there. But in any case, you know, I was happy to cash the ticket. I was happy to see him arrive in the UFC. I think he's a fun guy with a fun style. But I also thought the Charles Johnson fight, you know, was one where maybe his grappling would get exposed. And Charles, he refuses to grapple almost like definitionally. Like, he just will not do it. It's in his core. He's an anti-grappler. He anti-grapples people. He does not proactively grapple unless they do. So he reactively, grapples. Now, you look at a guy like Ray Soria, he's going to go out there and push the grappling. He's going to go out there and try and assert that. I think Joshua Van, when you watch back the tape, which I did right before we got on the air, because this is one where I feel like I have to watch some tape to get a better feel. I'm going to watch more tape before I finalize my opinion. I always encourage you guys, read my articles. I take great pride in them. I can't guarantee that the picks will be right, but I will try and get all the information right. I will always try and get a detailed breakdown. I'll try and give you the path to victory for both sides of the fight and be fully transparent with all my thoughts after doing a lot of research on these fights. And that's what I take the utmost pride in, is putting people in a position to succeed based on good analysis. And so when I look at this fight, I will say Joshua Van's takedown defense against the fence line is fantastic. His ability to get back up to the feet is really shocking, right? You look at the Cody Durden fight, and he's able to work back up so effectively in the first round and chip away at the body and chip away. You kind of see, like, over time, most guys cannot continue the pressure that they put on Van early, because in a lot of his fights, he does get pushed back to the cage and taken down, right? But it's not full compromise takedowns. It's butt seated against the fence, working up to a hip, getting back up on your side, never letting the guy consolidate top positions where they could beat you up, where they could threaten with submissions. Really doesn't allow that many back takes. However, if you look at the Felipe Bunes fight, for example, he did get in some really dicey grappling situations there. It's just that it was late in round one, and Felipe Bunes did not have the gas to continue pressing the action. So he came out in round two and started getting fucked up and started pulling guard and started making suboptimal decisions. And I think the same thing could happen to Soroya here. However, I do like some of what I saw from Soroya in terms of his modern grappling approach. You know, I like to think of myself as a student of the sport. I try and study the meta of things that really work at a high level. And you've seen a lot of guys in the UFC at the highest levels start using a front headlock pressure based game. When they can get on top, they try and put one hook in, maybe not two hooks in, because two hooks against a lot of guys now, they're too explosive. They have too many answers. They start to figure out ways to get back up to their feet, all these different things. Whereas one hook to a crossbody ride, you can really make it difficult for guys to move, and you give yourself a lot of options. You can come back out on top. You can come back to threaten the arm. You could go back to threaten a guillotine. You could look for your cradle series. There's a lot that you could do. And you see Soroya riding cross-body ride on Carlos Hernandez. I think that people maybe don't credit Carlos Hernandez as being a very, very good grappler, right? The guys that have caught him on the ground, sensational grapplers, right? Like guys that are really, really, really good on the ground. Tatsuro Taira, only guy to finish him with strikes in 28 contests, professional or amateur. The guy's just really tough, right? He's tough out. You go out there for a UFC debut against a guy like Carlos Hernandez. I picked Hernandez straight up, thought he was going to win that fight. And Soroya just found a way to get over on him, right? He out-scrambled him. You saw he faced a lot of resistance. Carlos Hernandez did an excellent job scrambling. He showed him that veteran class in the scrambles. But you also saw, like, man, this kid is really good. Like, this kid knows what he's doing. He can move with a black belt, flow, go this way, go that way, get back on top, get to your positions. And he was threatening. He was getting to good locks. He was, really showing a lot of depth of skill. But when you put somebody in a compromising situation, a fight that's harder than they thought it was going to be, hey, I'm used to finishing guys. I'm used to going out there and dominating. Now it's a hard fight. He's slowing down a little bit. I think that could be a huge problem against Van. So right now, it does seem to me like a fight where the ABCs say always bet on cardio. Do I think the right guy's favored? Yeah. Would I make it like Van minus 150? That's probably where I would settle out. I always think it's very hard to make somebody a huge pre-fight favorite when I don't even expect him to win the first round. And I think there's a decent chance that Joshua Van is getting taken down and dominated in the first round of this fight. And the reason I say those words in particular is because I do not expect Ray Soroya to push him back into the fence. This is not a fight at the UFC Apex. I think he's going to try and get him to commit to some strikes out in the middle, throw a combination with your hands. And when he does, he's going to level change to a low ankle. He's going to try and put him into wrestling scrambles. And that is where Ray Soroya will be one step ahead of him, in my humble opinion, especially early, especially fresh. So I think that those are the positions where, frankly, like, would it stun me if Joshua Van ends up getting twisted in the first round or something ridiculous? Like, honestly, it would not, because I do think the difference in decision-making on the ground could be astronomical, right, in the first frame. But I think that as the fight gets extended, Josh Van has a great style of attritional work that saps away people's will to win and their cardio and their energy. And at 22 years of age, when you're young and you're used to having a lot of success and you start getting really hurt and you start getting not just tired, but you're sore and you're feeling sorry for yourself and you're maybe doubting whether or not you're going to be able to get it back to the ground, I think that's where we could see Soroya maybe check out and suffer, that prospect loss. So Van's been tested more. He's been in the deep waters against these tough guys. He's been fighting really good UFC level opponents. But I do think it is an interesting style clash. And we don't really know what Van looks like on the ground in extended exchanges with good guys. We've seen most of the time he does a great job against the fence in open space. I think there's a little bit more of an open question about what we're going to see from him. And we saw Soroya multiple times get chest-to-chest presser, pinning, getting to dominant positions, passing to the mount. Felipe Bunes passed to the mount on Joshua Van, attempted a sub, going crazy late in that first round. Like, can Ray Soroya really not take this guy down and dominate him in the first round? I think he can. So I think your point about the live bet makes a lot of sense. I think the Van late round props, good way to get off the chalk and find a way to target him at a good plus money angle. I could see this being a competitive decision as well. Honestly, I just think both guys have paths to making their game work. And the one thing I will say is this. In most of these fights, we've seen Van be able to shut down most of the offense and make people tired with his offense. If he is getting dominated in the grappling, we could see Josh Van get tired for the first time, because a lot of people do not know what it's like to be dominated by somebody who's really physical on top, who holds you down, puts you through the paces, puts you in a lot of choke attempts. You're fighting off everything. You're in panic stations for 5 full minutes. That could drain all your adrenaline and your cardio early as well. So I just think this is a fascinating fight. I'm kind of surprised. I think let me just double check. I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I think that the fight not to go the distance is plus money. Yeah, plus 140 right now on the fight not to go the distance. I'm a little surprised by that, I will admit, because I do think it could be a competitive decision. But I think more often than not, whoever's game gets off in this one probably wins it and finishes it. We've seen Van submit it before. We've seen Ray Sorolla get, tagged up a little bit in the 3rd round before, when he started to get tired and huff and puff a little bit. And Josh Van has a lot more power than the guys he was fighting on the road to UFC. So I think that this could be an interesting one. I want to shout out the chat, though. We've got some heavy hitters in the chat. Our guy Pepe says, the thing about Durden is that he's slow when he shoots, doesn't have good control, and poor cardio. I tend to agree with you. He comes out, he's a little bit front-loaded in his success. We saw that against Gutierrez, who we talked about earlier. The other thing is Van is arrogant. Can see him entertaining the grappling. Honestly, I feel the same way. I think arrogant might be a slightly strong word, but I do think he's maybe overconfident, right? So I guess 6 of one, half dozen of another. But I think it comes from a good place. He goes out there, he's willing to fight anywhere and be a warrior. But we also saw it get him knocked the fuck out against Charles Johnson, right? And again, it wasn't from a lack of courage or anything else, but it was maybe too much of that, where self-preservation would have perhaps sufficed. Van going to get cut soon, KO some regional bums, come back in a couple of years. Maybe so. I think both these guys are in a development phase of their career. That's an interesting note, though. Peace and Love in the chat says Sorolla needs a better test than Van. If he rolls him, really better anti-wrestling and forcing him to fight from uncomfortable positions. I don't think Van is that guy. Interesting. Okay. Should this fight have been on the main card? I think so, but I guess we'll have to find out, right? Both guys are young, and both guys still have a lot to prove. So they have a great opportunity here on free TV, and let's see what they do to make the most of it. Anything to add, Wiz?
Yeah, I can definitely see that finish in the round 1 for Sorolla. That's for sure. While fresh, we've seen how Joshua Van kind of almost gives away the first round from how patient he is, and almost a Peter Yan-esque style. Where he makes his reads in that first round, but that's never going to be the best way to approach a fight. So I see the angle for Sorolla round 1 submission. I just tend to think that there's a lot of improvements that both these guys can make since they're both at such a young age. I'm not going to say it's a lot easier to make the slight improvements in the grappling compared to the striking. That's just how I tend to read fights. More often than not, when it's a striker that's mainly going to be worried about the wrestling and the grappling, they're able to really work out a camp solely based off of defense and defensive grappling and making sure they're not having their back against the cage. Because the one thing that works against Sorolla here is I do think he's going to find himself on the back foot a lot. Since in the striking, I don't think it's going to be competitive. Wrestling from the back foot is hard. And I think everyone knows that. So for all those reasons, yeah, I still reiterate that live spot after round 1 is only what I'm going to be looking at, aside from that round 3 look for Joshua Van. This is an exciting fight, and I think both these guys have really good careers, and in terms of trajectory, I think they can stay in the UFC for a long time. I'm kind of surprised by the matchup.
I also was surprised by the matchup. Maybe they were not happy with how the Sorolla fight played out last time, and they wanted to test him a little bit more against somebody a little bit more violent. If you had to criticize Carlos Hernandez, maybe not the most finishing instincts, maybe not the most violent guy in the world, but just crafty everywhere, has skills in all positions. So I think this should be a good test for both guys. Let's find out.
Yeah, excited.
Next up, man, we got Curtis Blades taking on Rizvan Kuniev. Seems like a big price on Kuniev here. He's 31 years of age. Similar size to Curtis Blades. Obviously, Blades a huge heavyweight. Been knocked out brutally on a number of occasions. Doesn't have a ton of momentum in the division. Meanwhile, Rizvan Kuniev, 2-0 in the UFC's branded fights, right? He went on Contender Series twice, got 2, round 3 finishes. Actually, I think it was earlier the second time, but he got a round 3 finish. He's had a bunch of those in his career. He's a guy that goes out there and just keeps working people on the ground, takes them down, beats them up with ground and pound. He's not the most impressive guy you've ever seen physically, but you just look at this guy and you look at the fact he's got some decent wins on his resume. I just don't know why he's a massive underdog here. Like, do I think that Blade should be favored? I suppose so, but again, it just seems like a big price for a heavyweight fight where honestly, I don't know how I peg the wrestling dynamic in this fight. Not a lot of guys try and take down Curtis Blades. I think you can have success if you try and take him down. A lot of wrestlers, especially guys that are in the UFC, they have a lot of success on offense. They're not used to people taking them down. They're not used to trying to defend those takedowns. They're complacent, right? And I think that it's one thing to shoot takedowns. It's another thing to defend them. It's a lot more tiring to defend heavy takedown attempts as well, especially if you get taken down by a big man and he's on top of you. It's hard. So I think you look back at the Jailton Almeida fight. I was 100% sure Jailton was taking him down. And I said it. I was like, Jailton will take him down. I guarantee it. I was like, he's the better wrestler. I'm sure of it. He absolutely out-wrestled him in every position. Problem was, he completely gassed himself out in the process. He did no damage to Curtis Blades. And the way you rattle Curtis Blades is you punch him in the head. You do not just hold on to him. He's like, oh, we're in a wrestling match? I'm very comfortable with that. Rizvan is going to try and make it a wrestling match where he punches Curtis Blades in the head. And I think that in that kind of fight, he's a live underdog. So for me, I just won't overcomplicate it more than that. In most Curtis Blades fights, I'm looking to bet the underdog. We've even seen guys that didn't beat Curtis, but came very close, like Jared Senior Rosenstrike, who closed his eye, who had him all swollen up. He was a big underdog in that spot. I bet him as a big dog there. So I feel like you see a guy like Rizvan who didn't get the opportunity before. Now they're giving him the opportunity. And instead of having him fight some other fucking mediocre guy, they have him fighting Curtis Blades, like right off the hop. Is that to give Curtis an easy bounce? I guess your mileage may vary. I don't think they like Curtis Blades. I don't think they ever have. So that's the way I see it, man. I think they set this up so Rizvan Kuniev has an opportunity to springboard himself into a dead division that really needs life right now. As John Jones stalls out Tom Aspinall from the sidelines, like the division is simply in a complete gutter, and they need something interesting. And I think Rizvan Kuniev in the most interesting guy I've ever seen. I even thought that he was live to go fumble the bag on Contender Series as a big favorite, but now he's a big dog after being a huge favorite on Contender. And I'm just like, are we sure? Are we sure in heavyweight fighting? So I just don't see it. What about you?
I don't have the biggest read on this fight, I'll be honest. One thing that I want to point out is look at Kuniev's physique from his time at the PFL versus the last Contender Series fight. It is night and day difference. When he was in the PFL, looked like he was on all of the Flintstone gummies. Versus the Contender Series fight, he came in, for lack of better words, like a blob. Didn't have those PEDs that you can use in the PFL and get away with. So that's something interesting that I will note. I have forbidden myself from betting on a Curtis Blades fight because he's so hot and cold in the division. He wins a dominant decision. He'll knock people out. But what people are expecting in this bout is for him to win via takedowns. But you look through the numbers, and I think Curtis Blades has landed one takedown in his last 5 fights. It says a lot. I think he only shot one takedown in his last 5 fights. What that spells to me is a fighter that has really fallen in love with his hands. And as a heavyweight, when you're a wrestler and you fall in love with your hands, and you're not really like the best striker, it spells trouble. At a big chalk price point, you want to either stay away or take the dog. For me, I'm taking the dog. I think Kuniev does have attributes that could trouble Blades. I think he could take Blades down. I think he could outstrike Blades. And even if he doesn't outstrike Blades, it doesn't take a lot to knock Blades out. I think every time someone touches Blades' face, the reaction he gives is just a little telling to the durability slowly fading away. And we kind of seen it. We've seen it against Aspinall. With all due respect, Tom Aspinall is arguably going to be champ at some point or another. Against Pavlovich, don't know what he was doing in that fight. Didn't really look like he was eager to even shoot a takedown. against a guy who has much faster hands and much better hands than him. And then against Gelton Almeida, let's not forget, it looked a little weird in the beginning. Gelton looked like he was about to cruise into that full mount and then maybe get the sub.
I
Until
had Gelton minus 105, and I was in the midst of thinking I had made the greatest wager of my life.
and I had Curtis Blades. I don't know what price it was. I did not check, and I was questioning my sanity. So that's why I've forbidden myself from betting on Curtis Blades ever. And I think this is the spot to really fade him at this big plus money number. So give me Rizvan Kuniev. I think he's going to be able to get takedowns here, and I think he might be able to win via ground and pound. I'll call it second round ground and pound. He might struggle in the first, just getting a read on Blades, but I think it's going to go downhill from there. So it's dog or pass. I just urge everyone who's thinking of parlaying Curtis Blades to revisit the tape at least.
Man, I'm also surprised to see that the fight not to go the distance is minus 165 only. Like it feels like, again, that should probably be a little bit wider for me. So I'm kind of disagreeing with the market on the assessment of this fight. I think Kuniev is more live than the market's giving credit for, and I would probably make it minus 250 that this fight ends inside the distance, maybe a little bit higher personally. So I'll do a little more research, make sure I'm not just smelling my own farts here or something, but it just seems like you've got two guys that both can go out there and probably get cracked. So, like, yeah, I think that's an interesting look, especially a guy in Curtis Blades finished in the vast majority of his losses, if not all of his losses. Like, yeah, very.
Would you consider taking the inside the distance line compared to the money line here for Kuniev? So money line's plus 290 right now on BetOnline.
Or even like, why not both? Like, let's imagine Kuniev is a huge fraud, right? Then he goes out there and gets crushed by Blades. Okay, fair enough. Like, then you cash the minus 165. But it's like, let's imagine he's not a fraud. Then we hit the minus 165 and Curtis Blades get flatlined in the first round like he does in most of his losses anyway. It's like, okay, run that,
yeah. Kuniev inside the distance plus 425.
But again, which is kind of wild for a heavyweight that
like,
could get on top against a guy who's been hurt before on the feet, hurt recently. So all of it's very interesting. Yeah, and Peace and Love says ITD better than Moneyline Blades. I agree. Like, I think take fight not to go the distance rather than minus 330 Curtis Blades. Like, I feel like you just have way more equity in that kind of fight. But that's my personal opinion. Y'all do whatever you think. If you think he just grinds out the decision, God bless you for it. I just think there's a lot more volatility in this fight. And to your point, man, Curtis Blades, I was there in person in Columbus, Ohio when he knocked out Chris Daukaus. So, yeah, I think that was the night where he was like, I am the best striker in the heavyweight division. It's time for me to go let people know with my hands. And then you see against Sergey Pavlovich, he's out there trading hands with the guy who's got absolute toasters for hands. And that ended very poorly for him, right? So I think that there's kind of been a lot of examples of Curtis not fighting up to his own potential in terms of a good game plan. So I'm not going to trust him to do it now at a big chalk price when he's coming off knockout losses in brutal fashion. And he's getting up there in age as well. He's had a lot of hard fights in the UFC.
The one thing I will note is before anyone plays anything in this fight, I'd say wait until you see Kuniev on the scales. Let's just take a peek at his physique.
Yeah, let's see if he's showing up looking like the ghost of Kuniev. We had Jake Collier once showing like he ate Jake Collier. So let's see what happens with this one.
Let's see if he's gonna look like a milk bag.
Hell yeah. All right, next up we got Bobby King Green taking on Mauricio Hufi, and obviously the more experienced fighter is Bobby King Green by a massive margin here, but he's also 10 years older. He's been finished by Paddy Pimblett in his most recent contest where he got blasted on the feet, goes to the ground, gets submitted there in brutal fashion. Everything went wrong for Bobby there. And we've also seen a couple times now, in my opinion, where Bobby Green could literally fight perfectly, could do everything right, and still get brutally, brutally knocked out. Go back and watch the Drew Dober fight, guys. I had bet Bobby Green that night. I thought he was pitching an absolute shutout. And what do you see? Drew Dober starts to get a beat on his timing, delivers with a combination, and goodbye, Bobby Green. fight is over shortly thereafter. I think that the problem for Bobby Green is that his chin just does not take a great shot. He fights with a hands down style and always has. It's hard to change that as you get older. So he does some very interesting things. You know, he's had great fights. I bet him against Fiziev as a massive underdog. He fought to a close split decision. Like, I've been there with Bobby for some of these times. I had him against Nasrat Hakparas. He gave him an absolute lesson, boxed him every which way but loose, boxed him out of his shoes. But when you look back at Bobby Green, unless he can go out there and dictate, you know, by setting the tone with the jab, moving around, throwing you, you know, a series of combinations, keeping you guessing, making you miss, bouncing you off with the defense, giving you the looks, you know, saluting to you, all these things, the Bobby Green classics. If he can't get into that kind of flow state and maintain it for the full 15 minutes, a lot of times it just doesn't go right for him these days, right? He's fought to a ton of close decisions where it's gone some his way, some not his way throughout his UFC career, been hit and miss in those ways. Judges don't always like his style. And when we see him go out there and take more risks, be more aggressive, be more assertive, unless your name is Grant Dawson and you don't take that great a punch, like, he's mostly just going out there, landing his offense. And then if somebody connects back, things can go sideways in a hurry. And I think that Mauricio Rufy hits very, very hard. I think that last time out was a wake-up call. Hey, can't go out there and swing crazy for the knockout against all these guys. They're not all going to fall. Got to fight more composed over 15 minutes. You don't chase the knockout. You let it materialize. And I think that in this fight, he's not going to chase the knockout. I think he's going to let it materialize. I think he's going to brutally finish Bobby King Green. And that's the way I see it going down. So, Fighting Nerds, I feel like, are a very good camp. I feel like they've put together a lot of great offense in the UFC. I feel like last time out was a learning curve fight for Rufy. But as far as I'm concerned, he's a dynamic striker. He's very fast. He's very talented. He's got a lot of power. And we've also seen when he mixes it up in the grappling, he's not out of sorts. Against Raymond Magomedaliev on the Contender Series, he cashed as an underdog up a weight class, and he was able to outlast him in that fight, come back and rally in the third round. I think even if Rufy is down in this fight, it will take one good exchange to win the fight for Rufy, and I think he's going to find that exchange. So give me one shot, Mauricio Rufy, to give one shot to Bobby Green. Send him home.
Yeah, let's just say we're in agreement, because this is the best I can do with my Fighting Nerds glasses, but we're going full Fighting Nerds here. Yeah, man, you broke it down perfectly here. Bobby Green is getting up there in terms of age and fight age. This guy has had more fights than most in the UFC, and tremendous vet. But at some point, your durability tends to go away, and I think that's just the issue here. The biggest advantage to me here, aside from the power for Houfi, is that reach. When you have a fighter that fights with his hands down and you have that much of a reach advantage against them, it's just going to spell trouble, because the shots are going to come a little bit faster. And King Green is not the most efficient at keeping his distance. So I just think Mauricio Rufy is going to get this done in the first round via KO. Much more dynamic striker. Sure, it's in the big cage, so he won't be able to land those big shots at ease. And Bobby Green is a decent mover for what it's worth. But I just don't think Houfi is going to be rushing it like he did against Yontop. I don't think Bobby Green is going to be able to eat as many shots as Yontop did. I will say that Yontop is a little bit easier to hit, but I don't think it's going to take much to put Bobby Green out. For all those reasons, I think it's going to be Houfi via KO. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone, but there's a line that sticks out to me here. And I almost wish I had the books that I could get out in Vegas that are legal. If you could get under half a round at any of these books, I would seriously consider it. Under 1.5 at plus 150 here is also a gem, in my opinion. I'm on that personally. And I just think that's how I see this fight going. I'd rather play the under 1.5 than a Houfi inside the distance or a Houfi KO, just because you kind of push away the risk of him actually gassing out if he doesn't land the shots as the fight goes on at a heavier chalk price. So you're getting, I guess you're covering both sides with a knockout. I don't think Bobby Green's going to knock Houfi out, but he knocked out Grant Dawson with like the first couple of punches, so I'm not going to say anything's impossible anymore. So under 1.5 at plus 150 is a great look here, in my opinion. I think Kofi just dominates him in the first round here. That's my pick.
Well, there you have it, man. We tend to agree on this one. I will say, Pick'em MMA says, imagine Roofy by sub. I'm always a contrarian in my looks. Bet Online opened at 9-1. It's now all the way up to 16-1. So they've basically gotten a ton of action on other props that have made them steer away from that prop, right, and inflated a little bit to try and get some buyback on it. As far as I'm concerned, though, we've seen Mauricio Hufi in a position where if he wanted a submission against Raymond Magomedaliev, it was free. Whatever he want, he literally could have done whatever he wanted. He's a violent guy, right? He took him out instead with the strikes on the ground there, beat him up, got the ground and pound finish. Could he have gotten the submission? In my humble opinion, he absolutely could have done so. And looking back, no submission attempts for him yet in the UFC, but we just saw Bobby King Green got hurt, attempted some panic wrestling, got submitted on the ground right after. We saw that with Andre Fili, right? He was having great success on the feet, took it to the ground, made one mistake, fights over shortly thereafter. We've seen that a million times in UFC fights. So as far as I'm concerned, Brazilian guy, 16-1 to win by sub, that always is going to at least pique my attention. But Bobby Green is a great grappler. He's difficult to submit. You're going to have to hurt him before you catch him, but I think that's always possible. So as far as I'm concerned, man, this is a fight where lean towards Roofy inside the distance early. And that's kind of the way I see it going, but I think he's live throughout. So maybe if he goes down at some point, like let's say he's down 2 rounds and he's like plus 800 live after 2 rounds, that's when I get in on Roofy because I'm like, let's find out, because again, could Bobby go out there and finish it out? Yes. But could I also see Roofy connecting with one blow when he's down 2 rounds and, getting a spectacular comeback finish? Yes. So for me, that's ultimately the way I see this going down. Roofy inside the distance at some point in the 15 minutes. All right, guys. Next up, we've got a women's fight where Amanda Lemos is taking on Yasmin Lucindo. Why don't you lead us off on this one, Wiz? How do you feel about the two ladies squaring off for strawweight supremacy?
This is a little bit of a weird one for me because if you ask me who's better skill for skill, I'm going to say it's Amanda Lemos. But we take a look at the measurables and the advantages here on paper, and 14-year age gap is just it's a glaring stat right there. And we've kind of measured, we've seen that stat float around. If it's a 10 plus year age gap, the likelihood is somewhere above 70% in terms of a win. Now, this is WMMA, so it's a little bit different where we don't see as much finishes. On the contrary, though, both these ladies throw heavy leather. And we've seen Amanda Lemos knock out many fighters in this division. And Lucindo is starting to get the rep for being an aggressive fighter, similar to Lemos in a sense where she throws out the heavy volume with power more than anything. Now, where I think Lucindo could find some success is the wrestling and grappling here. Does she go to it much? I wouldn't say so. I do think this fight might play out on the feet for the majority of the time. I just think that Amanda Lemos is a little bit faster than Lucindo here. I don't think she has lost a step. You look at her last couple of fights, the fight against Zhang Weili, you cannot fault her for that at all because Zhang Weili is the pound for pound GOAT in WMMA, and that's just something that I will stand on. You will look at the Verna Jandiroba fight, and she was competitive, had Verna in some really precarious spots there too. Beat Mackenzie Dern, who was predominantly looking to grapple you, and she does not have the best striking defense, let's just be honest. And then Lucindo, I just think she's maybe a little bit too green in the sport. She has many years in front of her to improve, but I just don't think that she's going to be able to match the power and the pressure that Lemos puts on, especially in the bigger cage. So I think this is a very close fight. I think this fight does tend to go to decision more often than not, and potentially a split. I'm interested to see what ends in split is on this fight. I'm going to go on the record and say it's Amanda Lemos by decision. Confidence level, 30%. I just don't have the best of reads on this one.
This is definitely one that I haven't taped yet, and so I have to tape more before I give my like final verdict here. But I am going to disagree slightly, and here's my ultimate read on this fight. Number one, I think the right woman is favored. And I know a lot of people that like Amanda Lemos this week, and I get it. She's a proven commodity, 37 years of age, fought for the title, very physical, done a lot of things right. Here's my problem. He's not a lifelong fighter, certainly has some striking pedigree, right? And has that ability. But you look at her grappling and it's a work in progress, right? Has some aggression, right? Excuse me, I'm going to turn off that ringer. That'll never happen again. So sorry, folks. But in any case, if you look back, somebody like Amanda Lemos, she's got knockout power on the feet. She's willing to attempt submissions, right? She'll go for those hard guillotine chokes when she's a big plus money underdog, like plus 200 and stuff. I've been there. Like Marina Rodriguez, absolutely. Like let's find out. That's how I felt. I was like, if they're grappling, like give me the girl who's really strong. I'll take her. If they're striking, give me the girl who's going to knock somebody out. I'll take her. Like that was just how I felt about Lemos in that one. Now you give me Lucindo, and is she the most dangerous grappler you've ever seen? No, but she's getting there, right? She's getting a lot better, and she's 23 years of age. She's got more professional fights than Amanda Lemos, who is 37, going on 38. And when I look at trajectories, I say to myself, I got a Yasmin Lucindo, who most of her losses were when she's a kid. She's a kid. She's 23 now. She's coming into her own. She's coming into her own physically. She's coming into her own technically. She's coming into her own in terms of confidence and preparation and experience, not only at the UFC level, but as a professional overall. And I think that Yasmin Lucindo is now starting to build into that rhythm, that flow, that confidence. And Amanda Lemos, as far as I'm concerned, is flat out exploitable. That Jessica Andrade fight, guys, there's no excuse. Like literally, you should never be a UFC fighter getting submitted like that ever. Period. You just shouldn't. And that's no disrespect. That's just the truth, right? She's doing this. She got her mouth open, reaching out for hands to help her. Like it didn't. It was none of the right defensive reactions, right? You answer the phone and you get tapped, no problem. You try and push away on two hands on the face and you can't get out, no problem. But none of the right defensive steps were taken. Panic. Big open mouth. I saw a ghost. Terror. That's white belt stuff. It just is, and when you look at a girl like Amanda Lemos, she has some fights where she looks really good and competent and other fights where she makes huge critical mistakes and looks all out of sorts. And as far as I'm concerned, this is the kind of fight where maybe she could still pull it out one more time with the physicality and her abilities. But I think that if she gets put in negative wrestling and grappling situations, there's a decent chance she gets exposed. We've seen, she goes out there, hurts somebody like Angela Hill in the first round, but can't put her away, finds herself completely gassed in rounds 2 and 3, very nearly loses that decision to a flat out, with all due respect, journeyman level fighter at that point in her career, right? I mean, like we've seen Angela continue to get better, but at that point in her career, she was a journeywoman level fighter, and you're basically going to a life and death split decision with her, right? So again, I just see Amanda Lemos as at her best, finish upside, really dangerous, got some plus level skills everywhere, but at her worst, defensive liability on the feet, cardio is subject to flagging out at times. And in terms of her grappling, again, it's something where we've seen very good offense and very suspect, horrible defense that could have gotten her finished against worse girls and has gotten her finished against other girls. So I think Yasmin Lucindo is going to get this done with her grappling, with her ability to outwork her a little bit in terms of pace on the feet. But if she gets cracked, I won't be that surprised. I haven't laid any chalk on this, but I'm going to do my tape study and my due diligence. I've been high on Yasmin Lucindo since she arrived in the UFC, and I think that she's going to continue to produce. I bet 6 units on Yasmin Wadegi against her in her UFC debut because I was like, it's too much too soon. And even in that fight, she went out there and competed and showed me like, no, this girl is ready to come out here and make a name for herself right now. So I think Yasmin Lucindo's for real. How about you, man?
Now, one thing I'm going to point out, Lucindo has lost 3 times via sub, albeit this is back 2018 and previous. Lemos by submission at plus 900. She has 3 wins by sub. I might have to take a poke. That's all I'm going to say.
Hey, you know what I'm kind of interested in? The fight ends via sub. Because I think that Yasmin Lucindo's probably going to attempt takedowns here, and Lemos might go out there and pull that guillotine. She does it, like, go for it really hard. You know, I had, what's her name? Oh, goodness. She changed her name, Karate Hottie, Michelle Waterson
So
Gomez.
Watterson,
Michelle
Gomez.
Waterson Gomez, dude. I had her by submission against Amanda Lemos, and she went out there and forced the grappling and then got subbed. And I was like, oh, how did I not bet the ends by sub? So
That's the
if I
thing.
do, I'll stack it up, you know?
It's just something that just glared out to me if you're just looking at paper matchup and you see, okay, you lost 3 times by sub, won 3 times by sub. It's like you want to throw a little bit of cash on it. I don't think I will end up having a ton of exposure on this fight, if any at all. But that submission by Amanda Lemos does interest me.
There you go, my man. Also, it looked like somebody, like I was just trying to put comments up on the screen. It looked like somebody left something racist in the chat. Please don't do that, guys. I don't like putting people in timeout and shit like that. You guys are adults, but don't try and fool me. Don't try and put bullshit in there. Please. That's all I ask. We'll just keep it rolling from there. Anyways, guys, we got Jalen Turner taking on
Oh
Ignacio
boy.
Bahamondes in the next fight. And oh boy, I've been a huge Jalen Turner fan. Eventually, you know, you got to start saying that you are who the record says you are. At 14-8, like Jalen Turner is a guy that has underperformed his career expectations up to this point, and still on the right side of 30. Maybe he could turn it around, but I haven't seen enough to go out there and say confidently he's going to do so. You know, I think we talk about you get a certain number of chances, you get a certain time to develop, right? This is a guy who's very big for the weight class, has to cut a lot of weight to make 155 pounds, seemingly, right? He's got a huge frame for the division. He says confidently, like, I don't need to go up to 170, 155 is the home for me, even though he gasses out consistently in a lot of these fights. So, again, I think he's a career manager that I don't necessarily agree with all his career management decisions, but you look at the skills, they're undeniable. He's a very dangerous grappler in the early going. He's a very opportunistic submission grappler. I love his guillotine series. I cashed on it at 9-1 against Brad Riddell. I think 7-1 against Uros Medic. You know, I've been there, right? I made a lot of money on Jalen Turner fights. Problem for me is you get audited in the grappling by Matt Frivola. I'll forgive. You get, you know, basically tuned up like an old guitar by Dan Hooker in a fight where you broke his arm and his face early. Okay, again, I can forgive. Dan Hooker's a dog, veteran experience, been in the trenches, found a way to dig one out. Okay, some of the losses on the regional scene, I'll write those off. Young guy making some, you know, mistakes in his career, no problem. The one that is hardest to swallow is the Hanato Moicano fight. And I had actually wrote up in my article for Roto Grinders. I write on my articles every time. I said first round knockout for Jalen Turner, or Hanato Moicano comes back and finds a way to win it. Because now we've just seen the book kind of come out on Jalen Turner, where if he doesn't finish in that round, starts feeling sorry for himself a little bit, and maybe he isn't the same guy always in those deeper rounds. And again, I'm not trying to be hypercritical. I'm just saying the guy, in terms of the explosive first round finishing, he's right up there with a lot of lightweights. It's like extremely dangerous, one of the most dangerous guys in the division, huge, dangerous on the feet, dangerous on the ground, checks a lot of boxes. But the ABCs for me say always bet on cardio. And the one thing I know about Ignacio Bahamondes is he's not going to fuck off for 15 minutes, right? You could kill him, but if you don't, he's not going to fuck off for 15 minutes. He's going to keep trying hard the whole time, even if he gets battered. We saw him get absolutely battered in his UFC debut by John McDessie. And what did he do? Walk forward and attempt offense the entire time. That's the kind of guy that he is, and he's massive. So is Jalen Turner going to be that much bigger than him? No, they're going to be very similar in size. So now I just say to myself, I'm like, Jalen Turner goes out there and last time out has a win in his hands and tries to go for the walk-off knockout. That's a fight IQ mistake. Like, we got to get to a point where we got to say, when are we going to stop making mistakes? When are we going to stop letting wins slip through our fingers? When are we going to stop getting tired and fatigued in the second and third round of our contest? It's hard things to swallow, right? For a guy that's this talented and this experience, he's had 20 professional fights. Certain time you got to figure it the fuck out, or not, right? But it's like we haven't seen him figure it out yet. We are still seeing him make huge categorical mistakes that cost him fights, that cost him major opportunities. And by the way, guys, Renato Moicano, now he's got a couple TKOs on his record. God bless him for it. He had never TKO'd anybody in his career until he TKO'd Jalen Turner. You know, he's hardly getting on top of anybody in the second round of these fights. He got on top of this guy, no problem in round 2. He's like, let's keep it going. I like where I'm at in this fight because I see you getting tired. That for me is just a huge problem because I know that if Ignacio Bahamondes sees you getting tired, you're going to turn it up with his volume. He's going to be willing to put you through that front headlock series all over. And like, we know that Jalen Turner likes those things offensively. How do you like being on the other side of those defensively? Matt Frivola is going for triangle chokes, mounting him, like looking for every position he wanted, taking him down every which way but loose, sideways and the other. It's like, do I expect Bahamondes to out-grapple him? Not if they're both fresh, but in rounds 2 and 3, when this guy starts to get tired and feel sorry for himself, like I could see it. And again, I like Jalen Turner. It's hard for me to talk like this about him. I wish nothing but the best for him. I hope he comes out here with 15 minutes of cardio to shut me the fuck up. But have I seen it? No. And what I've seen is, in fact, the opposite. So give me Ignacio Bahamondes in a closely lined fight where I expect him to have much better cardio and durability. It's like, yeah, he could definitely get knocked out here. But if he doesn't, I think he's going to flip to a live favorite after one round. So that's how I feel. How about you, Wiz?
Boy, do I have a lot to say on this one. I'm going to start this by prefacing me and Jalen Turner used to be coached by the same coach. We shared a gym. So I'm very familiar with his game.
I take back everything I said. Much respect to Jalen Turner. No, it is respect, though. It is respect.
It was for a shorter period of time, for about 6 to 7 months. So I'm familiar with the guy, and looking at this fight at first glance, it's almost a very similar matchup. Both guys, same height, same reach. Jalen Turner's used to having the measurables advantage, and he tends to be able to use it. He's going to struggle with that here because he's going to be met with someone that has the exact same frame as him. Second thing, Jalen Turner moving gyms. He left California late last year. He moved out to Florida. So that could be a good or a bad thing. More often than not, it's a good thing. Gaining more experience at a different gym, really trying to hone down on his skills and reinvigorate his career. But at the end of the day, the fight IQ is going to haunt him forever. I hate to say it. And you're going up against someone in Ignacio who is a really fucking good striker, who I would say I'd rate his defensive striking a lot higher than Jalen's. That's number one. And number two, he just has the durability advantage on Jalen here. Big time. We've seen Jalen's durability start to take a hit over his last 3 fights. And in Bahamondes fights out of Valley Flow Striking, who that gym I rate either in 1 or 2 in terms of game planning. They always come in there with a solid game plan. And now that Bahamondes has had a few UFC fights under his belt, there will be no jitters. There won't be any like fluke losses similar to the Magdesi one. Am I saying that this guy is going to be champion one day? I don't know. One thing before I even continue this breakdown, and I hope it's false, but I've heard that Tom Nolan is on his way to make a late notice replacement this card. The one person that has not posted anything in Vegas this whole week has been Jalen Turner. So this could end up being Tom Nolan versus Ignacio Bahamondes. This all could be false. But from what I've seen and what I've heard from chatter around just the California space, it's that Jalen Turner might be out of this fight. I hope that's false because this is a great fight, and I do predict this to be fight of the night. All things being said, I do think that Bahamondes is just going to be a tad bit faster here. And I think just the durability advantage for Bahamondes is what's going to ultimately lead him to winning this fight. Now, can Jalen Turner effectively grapple Bahamondes when fresh? Yes. Is he going to be opportunistic with his submission attempts? I have yet to see that with Jalen. So for all those reasons, I've leaned towards the Bahamondes side. Am I confident? Somewhat. I think Bahamondes is just going to be the more aggressive fighter here. And as the fight goes on, if it does extend into round 2 and round 3, we've seen how Jalen's cardio tends to take a deep dive. In that Hooker fight, really poor IQ there uh, in terms of just standing in a firefight when you can really use your measurable advantages and stay at distance and just outpoint the guy. Uh, so I think Bahamondes wins this fight if it still happens. Uh, but yeah, that's all I gotta say. I hope this fight stays on the card.
Me too, man. I think it is going to stay on the card, Lord willing. Knock on wood. Anything we got to do. It should be a great fight. I expect this to be a banger. I love watching both these guys fight, so really excited to see them on the card. But ultimately, Jalen Turner, I feel like, is in a prove it spot. He's kind of got to bounce back and show that he still wants to be here, that he can still go out there and fight hard for 15 minutes. And we know he's live to finish anybody in the first round, but I just find it hard to trust anybody at this kind of price tag when I can't trust them beyond that. And against a lot of these other guys, I just felt like the advantages were so much more clear. Uros Medic had nothing for him on the grappling. Brad Riddell is literally half his size, should be fighting at featherweight, and had nothing for him in the grappling. Relies on his wrestling every time he gets hurt. Like there was just a lot going against him. So I think that Ignacio does get hit a little bit too much. He could get hurt in this fight, but if it gets out of the first round, like I just know he's going to push a hellacious pace. So that's the way I see it, man. All right. Next up, we've got Justin Gaethje against Rafael Fiziev. And I forget who let us off on the last one, my man. I think it was me, though. So I'll let you lead us off on this one.
Yes, sir. So let's go ahead and break down this co-main event rematch, short notice rematch. Rafael Fiziev coming in on short notice, replacing Dan Hooker, who was originally scheduled to fight against Justin Gaethje here. Justin Gaethje, obviously coming off of a 10-month layoff here from the brutal knockout that he suffered against Max Holloway, got his nose broken by a spinning back kick in the first round, and it all went downhill from there. And once Max Holloway pointed to the ground in that 5th round, 10 seconds left, we were left with knockout of the year. I think everyone in the community was shook by that ending. Although Max Holloway was beating him from pillar to post, that was just one hell of a way to end the fight. So I hope Justin is in great health and in great shape. But let's rewind to their first matchup here. And I just am a little puzzled how that fight was scored for Justin Gaethje, albeit it was a close fight. But I do think that Fiziev won round 1 and round 3. Round 1 and round 2. Am I mistaken? He won 2 of the 3 rounds pretty confidently in my book. I had a larger position on Fiziev there. I think most of the community.
I think it was 1 and 2, and round 3
1
went
and
to
2, and
Gaethje from shutting
yeah,
his eye.
yeah, there it is. Fiziev is also coming off of a freak injury where his leg just snapped in half against Gamrot. So we haven't seen him in a year and 5 months too. So there could be rust on both sides. I think this first round is going to be very telling as to who is the more fit fighter. Now we take a look at Fiziev, and he was actually scheduled to fight last month. So he had been in a training camp and was ready to fight at some level. And I think this fight excited him because he wanted to get that one back. In terms of the striking, I will always favor Rafael Fiziev against most people in the division just due to the high-level Muay Thai. We don't really see that too often in the UFC. That's why I love the art of Muay Thai, and I study it day in and day out. And that's how I'm able to like pinpoint these predictions with like the guy like Carlos Prates. When I brought up him on the show when he was making his debut, I think Fiziev's striking is just levels above Justin Gaethje, but the one area that Justin Gaethje excels at and has continuously excelled at in the UFC is his toughness. Now, how is that going to change 10 months removed from one of the most brutal knockouts we've seen after also getting his nose smashed in the first round? It might play a part into how he absorbs damage moving forward, let alone being 36 years old. It's a tough one for me to see Justin Gaethje finding success early. Now, as this fight goes on, he may regain his step. And if he's able to really pour it on as he did in the third round against Fiziev, when Fiziev started to, not slow down, but he was not throwing as much volume. He was very much picking his shots. I think Gaethje could squeak out one here. But for me, all signs point to Rafael Fiziev landing the much more powerful shots. He was landing at will in that first round and that second round against Gaethje. And the one thing that I'm scared about with Fiziev is his ability to absorb leg kicks. He does check them, but again, he got his leg snapped in half. So how healthy is that leg? How conditioned is it to getting kicked is a big question mark for me. All that being said, I do think that Rafael Fiziev, being the younger fighter here, not being removed from one of the most brutal knockouts we've seen in a while, I think he's going to be able to hurt Justin Gaethje early and just cruise to a 29-28, if not a 30-27 decision here, just due to Justin Gaethje's toughness.
There you have it. So a great breakdown from our guy Wiz. And if we scroll back down, we'll take a look. Obviously, Justin Gaethje is supposed to fight Dan the Hangman Hooker. I don't know if y'all saw, Dan Hooker posted a photo of him with his daughter in the hospital. So obviously he, is dealing with that hand injury. He's laid up in the hospital bed. That's why he can't make it to this fight. And in steps Rafael Fiziev looking for his revenge. And I got to say, as far as I'm concerned, there's only one side I could be on in this fight, and that side is Rafael Fiziev. Reason being, last time these two guys fought, I laid the price with Rafael Fiziev. And you guys know I'm not a big favorite bettor. I'm pretty particular about my opportunities. Now, was I super proud of that bet? I mean, no, in hindsight, obviously the fight played out closer than I thought. I felt like if he didn't get that one big shot that closed his eye, like, yes, he was getting touched by Gaethje in that third round. He was getting touched up with the jab. But when you look at the overall body of work, I thought who landed the better shots? Fiziev. Who was closer to finishing the fight? Fiziev. Who basically won the vast majority of the minutes? Fiziev. And then he still found a way to lose the fight. Very close one as a minus 230 favorite. So obviously when you lay that price, you say to yourself, all right, I fucked up. I shouldn't have done that. But now, it's like a minus 150 in the rerun. And Justin Gaethje is coming off literally like the worst knockout in UFC history. I mean, like bottom 5, like he's literally laid out face down. I bet plus 950 on Max Holloway inside the distance. Max Holloway, guys, doesn't put many people down like that. Like you can go look at how he's finished guys. He's finished guys with attrition. He's finished guys by making them really fatigued. Has he finished a lot of guys by hitting them so hard they were just completely scrambled in the brain and fell over? Like, not really. And when you look at Justin Gaethje, is that the first time that's happened to him? No, it is not. Like he has been put through the absolute ringer in a career that has been full of dramatic violence. He gets hurt in virtually every contest he's a part of since he made it to the UFC, whether that was Michael Johnson in his debut or any of the guys he's fought since, with the exception of like maybe Cowboy Cerrone or somebody that he clipped in the first round. It's like this guy really just does not have a lot of fights where he doesn't get hurt. He gets hurt all the time. And so if you're going to get hurt all the time and you're going to fight a guy like Fiziev, like I think Fiziev's probably going to hurt you. And if you look back at Fiziev's best attributes, like he can time his shots very well. He spinning kicked Brad Riddell out of his shoes by lining up where he was going to be as he exited the pocket. Like the guy's thinking 2 steps ahead in a lot of his striking exchanges, which is why he hurts people really bad. RDA has fought a lot of these guys really tough, including, Gamrod and Scamrod, as I like to call him, no disrespect, but these guys that have just been sneaking out these close decisions on my guy RDA. And meanwhile, Rafael Fiziev put him in the bag because that's what he does to people. And I think that when you look at a guy like Fiziev, he's a very dangerous striker. He's a very talented fighter, and everybody is ready to sell him down the river against 36-year-old Justin Gaethje, even though he was a huge favorite last time out. And I mean, yeah, I can make all the caveats that it was a shitty bet and all that stuff. Should I have cashed that bet? Yeah, I should have. He won the fight, in my view. I thought he was a better fighter that night. I thought he did better work. I thought he should have won the fight. They didn't give it to him. They gave it to the other guy. Hats off to him. They needed a parlay buster. They had the parlay buster. It was Justin Gaethje. But at the end of the day, like who wins that fight in a rerun? If you had asked me that night, I would have said Fiziev. And I think Fiziev wins it again, except the only difference between me and you on this one, Wiz, I think he's going to knock him the fuck out. I think that when you look at Rafael Fiziev's offense, last time out, he hurt him really bad. He didn't put the brakes to him, and he realized afterwards, like, hey, kind of let that one slip through my finger. If you hurt a guy like Gaethje, out of respect for how dangerous he is, put him the fuck away. Don't fucking hang out. So I think Fiziev's going to go out there with intent to kill. I think he's the kind of guy that stays ready. By the way, he's in Thailand. I looked up pictures of him, 20 weeks ago, looking jacked, looking ready to go, got them abs going 20 weeks ago. By the way, not just American Top Team has them things they shoot, Thailand's a place where a lot of guys go to go check out their wares, so to speak. Y'all can do your own research, but essentially, like, could Fiziev be coming back on some super juice after, taking some time away from maybe USADA and those guys and figuring it out? Yeah, I think he could have been doing all that. So, are there unknowns with Fiziev that make me not want to go lay the -150 and hope that more money comes in on Gaethje, get me a -120, something like that? That's what I would prefer ultimately, but it's clearly for me a Fiziev or pass situation based on the fact that last time they fought when Gaethje was closer to his prime and hadn't been fucking brutally face planted in his last fight. I thought that Fiziev was going to win then, and I thought he did win then. So now I think he's going to win again and just do it more devastating.
I can't wait for this fight.
Let's go.
Number
I absolutely love it.
In terms of strikers in the UFC to watch, at least for me as a favorite, is Rafael Fiziev. And then close second, Carlos Prates. I'll put it at that.
Hey, well, we're in for a treat. Hopefully both guys are feeling healthy and good and ready to rumble. But I think that if that's what we get, I like the Fiziev side. Last but not least, my brother, we have the main event of the evening, the one that everybody is here for. I want to just say, guys, if you're still rocking with us, we are an hour and 40 minutes deep. I really appreciate the love and support. If you're on X with us, go ahead and hit that retweet button. Let other people know about the show. Go ahead and hit the like button as well. Just easy ways to show love and support. Hit the follow if you haven't already. I really appreciate that. Make sure you're subscribed to not only myself at LiamPicksFights on YouTube. It's a great way to show love and support to the channel. Great way to come and interact with the show. Join the sharpest live chat in the game. But also our guy WizzMMA. He is co-streaming this. He's got it running live on his channel as well. You can search WizzMMA. That is WizzMMA. And then go get subscribed over on his YouTube channel as well. You never know when the content's coming from our guy WizzMMA, but it's always good to be signed up so you never miss it. And I appreciate the love and support either way. Now it's right back to it, guys. The main event of the evening, Poatan Alex Pereira, 12-2 Shama. He's looking to go out there and do it one more time. 37 years of age. He's getting up there, but he's still finding ways to win against Khalil Roundtree. Drops an early round, finds a way to rally back, takes the will, the energy away from him, brutally damages him, finishes the fight. Meanwhile, Magomed Ankalaev, I think we all kind of know he's deserved the title shot for a long time. He's been shafted. He's been put to the back of the line. The UFC maybe said, like, maybe we don't want this guy who doesn't speak great English and doesn't have the most fan-friendly style to get easy title opportunities. He's got to earn it the hard way. He's got to do it twice against these guys if it's even controversial. Johnny Walker, he's got to do it twice. Iwan Kutlab, he's got to do it twice. But meanwhile, every time out, he's getting the win. Except for the Paul Craig fight, comes out there probably mobbed up in that one, don't shoot me. I'm just saying, but you go look at that fight. Like, he's giving up easy takedowns to Paul Craig in a fight where he's otherwise dominating on the feet. And then he gets submitted with like literally 1 second left on the clock with a triangle choke. And I can just tell you guys, like, you go out in a triangle choke before you give it up with 1 second left, in my humble opinion, just as a amateur, that trains a blue belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. That's my humble opinion. I've been put to sleep in a triangle choke before. It ain't so bad. You wake up feeling refreshed. Life is all cool in the gang. But in any case, everybody to each their own, right? So he tapped out in that one. Otherwise, this guy's been aces in the UFC. Between you and me, as my guy Dan Levy likes to say, right? If you look at that fight that he had with Jan Blachowicz, I thought he probably deserved to get the win that night. Like, I had Jan Blachowicz as a big ticket. Like, honestly, I bet him huge. I was like, how are they going to afford to pay this? Like, I just don't get it. All the money in the world was on Ankalaev that night. And what happened, Wiz? They didn't pay it. So instead, they gave everybody their money back. They were like, let's just get out of this bad situation. And they give it the draw, right? Ugly result. And what happens instantly? The UFC instantly pivots and goes, never mind. Neither of these guys were the champion. They never were. Instead, it's Glover against this guy. It was all super fugazi from the outset. I was like, what the fuck is happening here? Now Ankalaev's getting a shot. He's 21-1. I don't think they could deny him anymore. He's the younger guy with more professional experience. And I just think that if this is a fight that plays out purely in the striking, I favor Alex, but I think it's competitive. And I think that if it's a fight that plays out in the grappling, it's Ankalaev, and it's not even close. So for me, that just means he's probably got the big favorite upside in this matchup. I think that he's probably the side at this close pick'em type price, -103. I think that the books opened him up around -200. Personally, I feel like that was closer to accurate, honestly. Like, I would make this -150 Ankalaev at minimum, just because he's the younger guy that I think can compete in all phases of the fight. Now, the reason I cap his upside as a huge favorite is I think his fight IQ does leave something to be desired. I think we've seen it a number of occasions, waiting against Jan Blachowicz to get his legs shut down by low kicks before he easily takes him down and dominates the rest of the fight. Like, why didn't he do that from the outset and make it look easy? God only knows. But when I look at this fight, I just say to myself, like, if you have one shot, one opportunity to fight for a world title against a guy who can't wrestle a fucking lick, with no disrespect, like, you take him down and you make him look bad, and you win the title and you move on with your life, right? That just seems to me the way that it would go. So I think that this is the kind of fight where, you could look foolish. I have not had an easy time picking Pereira fights, but I will say I picked Israel Adesanya to defeat him when he knocked him out brutally in that fight. I picked Jan Blachowicz via split decision, and didn't work out, right? But was very close in the end. And you kind of look back at some of these performances, and Alex Pereira's gotten away with a couple, right? And Khalil Roundtree slowing down, big boon for him. I think Ankalaev could fight 5 if he needs to. I think he could take him down if he needs to. I think he could knock him the fuck out. So just for me, he just has more paths to victory. That's the way I see it. So I respect Alex Poatan Pereira. I think he's a great fighter and a great champion, but I also think age matters. I think experience matters. I think having fake black belts is a real epidemic in MMA. And, I don't think that he's a zero in terms of his grappling, but I do not think he's a very good grappler. I have not seen good instincts or fundamentals. I have not seen good wrestling. I've seen none of those things. So in terms of how I project this out, like, Ankalaev for me is the more well-rounded fighter, and I think he's probably going to get the win. What do you think about this one, Wiz?
Yeah, I'm going to be very upfront with this, and I have a little bias towards Alex Pereira. I've met the guy in the most absurd situation ever, in a location where I did not even expect Alex to be in a country that is just you don't visit Lebanon like that. So I met the guy, physical specimen. Just being around him, you're just scared. This was before his first Izzy fight in the UFC, and man, I think that's probably my favorite picture that I've ever taken of all time. Really nice guy nonetheless. But let's get back to this breakdown. There's a couple of things that I like with Ankalaev. Obviously, there is that big wrestling upside. Does he tend to go to the wrestling all that often? We just haven't seen him consistently do it. And then when he's striking on the feet, he is accurate, but he does tend to be somewhat low volume and does tend to pick his shots. Now, if this fight plays out on the feet predominantly, I think Alex is going to be pressuring. And the one thing I did not like to see on tape with Ankalaev is the fact that he eats leg kicks like no other. In the Jan Blachowicz fight, Jan almost finished him with leg kicks. And when you put up, some of the best leg kickers in the MMA game, and you stack them against each other, Alex Pereira has to be top 3. And you hear it from every fighter that he's faced. It just zaps people, and it does not allow them to get off on their game. And we spoke about this in a fight earlier. If you get your leg chewed off early, you're not going to be able to shoot effective takedowns. Is that going to happen? We will find out on Saturday. Now, the talk about the black belt for Alex Pereira and that being fake, and it's a little puzzling how he got a black belt so quickly. That's for sure. I think it was just, favorable coaching. Let's just put it that way.
Also, look at the Jan Blachowicz fight and tell me that's a fucking black belt, with all due respect. Because then you watch what his
Yeah.
actual black belt instructor
Yeah.
did to Jan Blachowicz at a plus 200 money line price when I was on him and said he would submit him, and he made him look like an amateur on the ground. So completely different levels. Please continue.
Brother, who give him black belt, brother? uh, but listen, I will say this: if he's able to chop Ankalaev's leg off early on, and Ankalaev shoots a sloppy takedown, and he finds a submission, would you not want to be holding a plus 1600 ticket on Alex Pereira by sub? I know you like playing contrary a lot, and
sub again, because I've wasted money on Ankalaev sub props already in his life.
I'm talking Alex Pereira by sub.
No, I know, but I'm saying there's reason to believe in both. I actually bet the end sub in the Izzy Pereira fight small as well, just because I was like, they might mix in the wrestling and grappling, and they did, and then they died on the feet anyway both times. I was like, come on.
Yeah, getting taken down by Izzy and held down in that third round, not a good look at all.
And then Izzy getting taken down was what we needed for the DDP fight. I was like, yeah, that's not going to work out.
So I think this fight plays out very close. I don't think it's going to be easy for me, at least, to play a money line side at all. So I'm going to target it in the angle of props, and obviously the Alex by submission is something I mentioned. I do have a sneaky feeling that this does go the distance. So plus 195 on goes the distance does intrigue me, but more so than anything, I do like the over 2.5. I think this fight does play out slow in the beginning, and we might get a late finish, if anything. But yeah, the over 2.5 piques my interest. I do think both fighters have equal equity to their path to victory, in a sense. I think Alex, if this stays on the feet, it's his fight to lose. With all due respect to Ankalaev's game, I do not think he moves well in the striking. He's very stiff, and I'm not the biggest fan of his footwork. Alex will be able to take advantage of those leg kicks. I just ultimately think that's where the stand-up changes. If Ankalaev does pose a heavy takedown threat in terms of his game plan, then it's, again, his fight to lose. Is he going to be able to take Pereira down consecutively and consistently? Has he shown that with, if you can discount the Krylov fight, look at the rest of his resume. Has he taken people down consistently? Not really. So for me, I think this fight is lined pretty accurately. But if you're asking who has more upside, it's got to be Ankalaev, just due to the fact that he can wrestle if he wants to. The IQ with Ankalaev is my issue. Otherwise, I would have already had a bet on him. He tends to just favor his striking more than anything. He's very comfortable at a tepid striking pace. And you can't have a tepid striking fight against Alex Pereira. So this is a toss-up for me. My heart is with Alex Pereira. So I'm just going to say Alex Pereira by 4th round knockout.
When I look at this, man, I see a Magomed Ankalaev who's never been stopped with strikes. He's 32 years of age. He's fought a bunch of UFC level guys at 205 pounds. Alex Pereira, I think people sometimes forget, fought to a 15-minute decision with Bruno Silva that was somewhat competitive. Like, the guy got taken down and dominated by Andreas Michailidis for a few minutes before he killed him. Like, I just think, looking back at his run, he's been match made very carefully his whole UFC career. They gave him Yuri twice because they were like, let's run this one again. Yuri's not smart enough to go grapple him. Like, I do think they like him. They want to see him succeed. They've waited. They put it in Ramadan. Like, anything you could try and do, check off the box to put Alex in a position to succeed. I think they've always tried to do that as best they can. If it's going to be on short notice and make it harder, then make it against Khalil, the number 6 guy, not the number 2 or the number 3 guy, right? All these things that we've seen them do. But now it's like they're out of options and they got to give the most meritocratic guy the opportunity. And it just seems to me like, again, every fight is a unique opportunity. Against Iwan Kutalaba, maybe just keep it upright and hit him on the feet a few times. You're the sharper guy. You're the faster guy. You hit harder. But against this guy, you take him down and you just expose the fact that he is a kickboxer at the end of the day. And we saw it against Izzy, like kickboxer against Duplessis, right? Duplessis, most of the time, he'll go banging out with you on the feet. But we saw against Darren Till, when that shit didn't work, he was like, fuck this. I'm going right to my wrestling. I'm going back to the ground. I'm beating him up there. And that's what I'm doing instead. And that's what you need to rely on sometimes as a mixed martial artist. And a lot of these guys had a lot of skill. You know, Yuri, I thought was going to beat Alex because he does have an ability to grapple as well, but he refused to try and put it there. He was more interested in trying to do damage, and he landed, but he didn't land enough, and he couldn't take the shots coming back. Ankalaev, as far as I'm concerned, do you want him taking the shots? No. But can he take the shots coming back? I think that's an open question, to say the least. And at 32 years of age, do we know that Alex can take the shots coming back? We've seen him hurt before. We've seen him knocked out before. So the answer is no. Like, he could definitely get knocked out in this fight. He's 37 going on 38. He could certainly get knocked out. So as far as I'm concerned, it's just a kind of fight where the upside for me is on Ankalaev, and I think a lot of dollars, and this is my personal opinion, I think a lot of dollars are going to be wagered on Alex Pereira this weekend. And by the way, the books opened it up with plus money all over Alex Pereira, and it's been gobbled up by the market. People are still laying it at chalk right now. I think they'll still lay it to minus 150. You know, like I truly believe the public would take it at any price up to minus 150 here. And I think that's plain wrong. So for me, it's Ankalaev. That's the take. God bless. Good luck. I hope that you guys have enjoyed the show. Wiz, why don't you tell the people where they could find you, all the great stuff that you got going on, and anything that you want to get off your chest, my brother. The floor is yours.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, as always, Liam, my guy, thank you for having me on. It's never a dull moment when we're on this stream and we're breaking down these fights. It's always fun. So I look forward to doing this again, and I'm sure it will happen, whether on your channel, whether on mine, or both. Secondly, you can find me at WizzMMA on all platforms. The reason why I haven't posted as many breakdowns or anything on YouTube over the past year, I would say year and a half, I've gotten a lot more involved with the coaching side, and I'm coaching a couple of UFC athletes now, so I can't really post this kind of content all that often. I'm actually getting sparring videos sent to me right now at this hour from a fighter who has a fight coming up in exactly a month and 1 day. So April 5th, look out. I will be at the UFC Apex in Vegas, potentially in the corner. Looking to continue assisting these fighters throughout their careers and helping them break down fights and helping them with their Muay Thai striking. So that's the biggest project of my career right now. I'm making a dream that has been something I've looked towards and worked towards for 5+ years. So very happy with where I'm at. And yeah, I'm continuing to post content on Twitter as much as I can. But you can always DM me for takes, or if you want opinions on fights. I have an open door policy, so you ask and you shall receive. But thank you guys for being so supportive on the stream, and thank you for being so engaging. I really appreciate it. And again, Liam, thanks for having me.
The pleasure was all mine, my brother. It has been an absolute blast. It's been great shooting the breeze once again. I want to thank you for coming on, my man. I'm always down to chat it up with you. If you ever want me to come on, do a stream with you, let me know. We're all excited to see you tearing it up in the corner, my man. That's an awesome place to be. So we'll be rooting for you. We'll be looking out for you next month. And otherwise, I'll just let you guys know, last week, I was at the state tournament, but I still take pride in my work. How about these as my DFS targets for Roto Grinders last week? Patreon always eats first. Chepe Mariscal, 9,400. He was a big favorite, right? One of the heaviest chalk plays on the slate. But I said, I still think you have to get there because he's a proven fantasy scorer. He was in the top 5 scorers on the slate. Sam Patterson, 7,000. Further out on the risk curve. But at 170 pounds, he's now 3 for 3. Justifying his salary, outperforming his salary, going out there, putting up a optimal score, and he absolutely delivered against Danny Barlow. I thought it was going to be a submission. Instead, a brutal first-round knockout for Sam Patterson. So the reads have been coming in hot. We had Hyder Amil via split decision, perfect call. We had Manel Cap via KO TKO. Yeah, he poked him in the eye like a dirty bastard. It's the cage fighting business. I'd rather bet on these dirty, rotten cage fighters and pick them to win. So this is the kind of thing where we've been locked in lately. Lord willing, we keep the ball rolling, but the hard work has been there. The picks have been selective this year in terms of my bets. I've been firing away very carefully, very closely, making sure I really believe in what I'm firing on, and it's worked out so far. So, Lord willing, this will be a great weekend for us. We got a lot of opportunities with fun fights, fun fighters, and some high-level guys as well because it's a pay-per-view. So, hopefully we can find the right opportunities. If you guys have questions, comments, concerns, go ahead and fire those off in the comment section down below. You guys can find me everywhere at LiamPicksFights. And that's all that I got for you today. If you've enjoyed this content, make sure you hit subscribe, make sure you drop a like, and make sure that you come back next time because we're having all the same fun again. Thank you all so much. Thank you to our great guests. Thank you to the sharpest chat in the game, and we'll see you next time.